We talk a lot about test scores, rankings, and which country has the best education system. But I think that question misses something bigger, because education isn't just about how well students perform academically. It's about what that education system allows students to become. And when you compare American and Korean education, you're not just comparing schools, you're comparing two completely different ideas of success. And both systems pay a price. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 저는 엘스입니다. Hi guys, I'm Elsa. Welcome back to my channel. For some quick context, I'm studying global studies, sociology, and communications. And for the past year and a half, I have been doing my graduation capstone project on Korean and American education systems. I've interviewed students, surveyed teachers, and lived in both countries, so this breakdown really comes from my own experience and research. At the root of this comparison is one major difference. America is built around individualism, while Korea still adheres to more collectivist ideals. And that single value shapes everything about their education systems, from how students are taught, to how success is defined, to how much pressure students are under. In Korea, academic performance is really tied to family and social expectations. Your future success and security almost entirely relies upon your education. In the US, high school life is split across academics, sports, clubs, having a part-time job, and your social life. College admissions care a lot about the individual that you are, the essays you write, the experiences you've gained, not just your test scores. So what does the daily life of both an American and Korean student actually look like?
내 고등학교 시절은 보통 7시에 시작해서 7시 반까지 학교를 갔어야 됐고 4시에 학교가 끝나면 뒤에 이제 학원 오후 10시, 11시까지 공부를 하고 하루가 끝났어요. 힘들었던 점 먼저 얘기하자면 힘들었던 점은 학원을 다니고 싶어서 내가 다녔지만 이제 그거를 스케줄을 소화하는데 힘들었었고 좋았던 점은 그 시간을 내 친구들과 함께 같은 경험을 하는 친구들과 함께 이제 시간을 보낼 수 있어서 좋았던 것 같아. 일단 한국 고등학생들한테 대학 입학에 대해서 기대되는 점은 보통 수능으로 많이 대학을 입학을 하는데 그걸 위해서 3년 동안 이제 준비를 하는 거에 있어서 계속해서 높은 점수를 얻기 위해서 노력해야 된다는 게 힘들 것 같고 공부를 위한 공부가 아니라 그냥 수능 테스트를 보기 위한 공부? 어떻게 하면 정답을 더 잘 맞힐지. 내 경험은 우리 고등학교도 대학을 많이 보내고 싶어서 학교에서 보는 시험도 수능하고 비슷했던 것 같아. 고등학교 친구들은 어쨌든 나랑 같이 생활을 하는 친구들이니까 대놓고 경쟁을 하진 않았는데 시험 성적이 나오면 점수를 비교를 하든가 등수를 비교를 하든가 랭킹, 스코어, grades 이런 거를 비교를 내 스스로 했던 것 같아.
My high school experience looked very different to that of my Korean friends. My school started at 7:50 a.m. and we had 4 class periods per day, switching off between A day and B day. So in a total academic year, we had 8 classes. We also got to choose electives like theater, ceramics, art class, creative writing. There was just a lot of different variety of courses we could choose from. In addition to these, we had college level courses called Advanced Placement or AP or Concurrent Enrollment. By my senior year, I had what we called free periods. Now, this is something I think Korean students would find very interesting. My free periods were essentially times that I could go off campus, go shopping, go take a longer lunch with my friends, hang out with my friends, or just take that time to rest. I'd consider this one of the biggest shocks for Korean students because the idea that time at school can be used for something other than academics is probably pretty different. I was one of the captains on the girls' soccer team. I was the debate club president. I was a member of the K-pop dance club. Yes, that is true. And however, even with college level classes and all these extracurriculars, my study time was still very manageable. When I think back on high school, my strongest memories are not academic. They're social. It's football games, school dances, hanging out with my friends, and going to school events. And that is very different from what I hear from my Korean friends, whose high school lives were almost entirely defined by the hours and hours they spent studying, either for the suning or for public school. But that made me wonder, is that freedom actually a strength? Or is it also America's downfall? That question leads to one of the biggest structural differences between American and Korean education, which is tracking versus standardization. Tracking is essentially just grouping students according to their perceived ability level, while standardization means that every student studies the same curriculum at the same level nationwide. Korea's public education system is highly standardized. This means that everyone learns the same material, they're in the same classes, and funding is centralized, meaning there aren't a ton of disparities between schools. In the US, however, curriculum and funding vary dramatically, state by state and even by district. This is because funding for schools depends on the tax dollars of the region in which you live. So, for example, if you live in a poor region of the United States, you're likely to attend a low-funded school. On top of this, American students are tracked early, as young as elementary school, into gifted programs, high and low ability math classes, and reading groups. This is why I admire Korea standardization so much as a former American student. When everyone is taught the same material at the same pace, at the same level, every student is pushed to be their best, and it limits how much personal bias can shape a student's academic path. Across multiple studies, it is shown that tracking doesn't meaningfully improve student academic performance. At best, it slightly benefits those put in a higher ability group, but often harms those put in a lower ability group. Overall, it produces a pretty neutral, if not negative, effect. However, what is more concerning is how students get placed into these academic tracks. Studies show that when teachers believed a student came from a low socioeconomic background, they were more likely to place them in a low ability group compared to higher socioeconomic students, even when grades and performance were identical. And I found that same pattern in my own research. Across both the US and Korean respondents, students from a higher socioeconomic background were most often tracked into the advanced placement and were more often recommended for a 4-year university, whereas the students from a low socioeconomic background were more often recommended for technical or vocational tracks. One of the most striking findings from my research came from American educators, who actually rated the low SES student as having higher academic potential compared to the high SES student. Yet they still recommended the high SES student to advanced placement more often. To me, that gap between belief and action says a lot, even when people have the best of intentions. The last difference in my research showed up in the amount of support. Korean respondents recommended, on average, almost double or triple the amount of recommended study hours compared to American respondents. To me, this was a clear representation of the different study cultures in Korea and America. Looking at all this research together, this shows that inequality in education isn't always obvious. It lives in assumptions, expectations, and in systems that we believe and hope to be neutral, even though they aren't. That said, Korea's system is not entirely free of inequality. Because publication is so standardized, students and families have to find other ways to get ahead. And this is found through private institutions. Families who can afford private education gain the advantage, while students from lower income families and rural areas fall behind. So even in a system designed for equity, inequality always finds a backdoor. When you place these systems side by side, it's clear that one excels where the other has weaknesses. Korea offers consistency and equity through their public education and high expectations for all their students. But this comes at the cost of extreme pressure and burnout. America offers creativity, flexibility, individualized learning, and a space for kids to develop their own interests. But this comes at the cost of biased tracking systems systems, inconsistent quality between schools, and inequality within our public schools. One system gives structure without total freedom, where one gives almost total freedom without structure. What Korea and the US can learn from each other, to me, is not about copying and pasting policies. It's about learning the actual values behind them. Korea could benefit so much from giving students more space to explore their own identities, their identities beyond academics. And America could benefit from holding all students to the same academic expectations and rigor, and not just those students who are placed in the advanced tracks. Because an education system is essentially just a mirror of what a society values. And the real question is whether we are willing to learn from each other and do better for the next generation. What do you guys think is the biggest difference between Korean and American education? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Annyeong! Okay, that's it.